There you go.
Okay,
He's right off. Yeah, we're good.
we're gonna want to mute our mics if we're not speaking.
Oh,
You want to take
Is
it
that
back?
the road?
okay. We will call to order board meeting number 424 work session held at the Water Center and live streamed on YouTube, I believe. The first order of business is roll call. Jennifer, could we have roll call, please?
Okay, Mr. Barker. Absent. Ms. Cole-Hansen. Here. Mr. Gibbs.
Here.
Mr. McMahon.
Sure.
Mr. Olmstead.
Here.
Mr. Stevenson.
Here.
Mr. Van Stone. Mr. Van Stone.
Here.
Thank you. Chairman Raybould.
Here, and Mr. Barker will be joining us later. He is over at the Capitol testifying this morning, so he will join us a little later. Okay, the next item on the agenda is social media strategy.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Steve Stubner will be presenting on this item. Just as a background, Director Weaver has asked staff to look at social media programs for both the department and the board. And so Steve has developed this social media strategy and stood up a couple of social media platforms, and he's going to be talking about that this morning.
Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, all. Steve Stubner, Communications Officer for the department and the board. And just wanted to walk you through some history and context on the department's social media outreach, general communications. So background on this is shortly after being appointed by Governor Little, IDWR Director Matt Weaver directed staff to get started on creating a social media outreach plan in December of 23. And Megan Jenkins, administrative assistant, you might call her kind of the chief social media wrangler in the department. She's done a ton of really great work on this. Invited staff to serve on an internal committee. And Matt asked me to develop some initial recommendations on social media outreach based on my experience over the years doing social media for a wide variety of clients over the last 15 years. So why engage in social media? The director's initial thoughts was receiving criticism from the public that our communications channels were old-fashioned and ineffective for large demographic groups. That's kind of a direct quote from the director. Some other considerations, publicizing department and water board projects in social media would provide greater transparency to underline how public funds are being spent on our water projects. And Governor Little and his PR staff want to see a high level of publicity about department and water board projects across all information channels, including social media. So Megan formed a social media committee. We had interest from all the different employees in all the different bureaus in the department. And we got together initially and I presented some initial recommendations for strategy. And then Megan and Lacey from our legal staff drilled down much deeper on the policy and guidelines, provide detailed guidance to staff on how we might do social media outreach. And we all got together with the director several times to refine and finalize our draft policies and guidelines during the month of January. So generally, social media strategies should follow the overall strategy of the department and the water board. And so just in terms of messaging, just drawing from like the IDWR mission statement, vision statement, those are a lot of words that you guys see in the state water plan as well. And some of those keywords are sustainability, conservation, planning and outreach, science, and modernizing our water infrastructure. Just again, on some of the guidelines, we wanted to keep things on the positive, sustainable outcomes of our projects. When you're posting, less is more. Social media is a very visual platform, so you can kind of let the video or the pictures do most of the talking and provide a minimal amount of text. Opportunity to educate the public about who is IDWR and the Water Board and what we do. Can publicize field activities in a timely manner, remind people about events, meetings coming up, same things that are publicized on Town Hall, Idaho. And then publicizing job openings for the department, which I think all of you know has been a challenge for the department and the board to fill open positions. Our guidelines include sideboards on what other state and federal agency pages that we might like, potentially share their content if it's relevant. Encourages liking social pages of our partners, including the Idaho Water Users Association. Lacey really drilled into how to handle negative or defamatory comments and public feedback on posts, and how to handle free speech issues. Who has permission internally to post content, basically members of our social media committee, and what social media channels we might start with. So a little bit of history just on some other channels. YouTube, we started a YouTube presence in 2016, so we could publicize some videos that we created about the ESPA managed recharge program and the 2015 water settlement. And then since that time, our YouTube page has been much more active, with Jennifer Strange has just done a great job managing the YouTube channel to record and share water board meetings and provide a way for the public to watch the meetings in real time. We've also had a LinkedIn page, which is kind of centerpiece for job hunters in the last 6 years. So after a fair bit of discussion, we decided that we would start with a Facebook page. And reason being, it's really the most popular platform in social media, not only in Idaho, but nationally and worldwide. Found one statistic that we have over 650,000 Facebook users in the state of Idaho, and that's probably a pretty low number. Most, if not all, Idaho state agencies have a Facebook page for sharing news and information about who they are and what they do. And Facebook allows more opportunity to provide in-depth information and feedback to educate readers. So I think all of you are aware, current trend is engagement with newspapers going down. And people are getting more of their news and information from social media and other special interest publications. This is a recent statistic just from 2023 in terms of where people are getting their news in social media, and largest percentage Facebook, YouTube, and then Instagram about half as much as Facebook, and then you've heard about TikTok and some other platforms. Over the last 15 years, I've seen a lot of those platforms kind of come and go. Who's on Facebook in terms of age range and demographics? This bar chart gives you an idea of that. Majority in the 25 to 35 range. And you can see the other information. I'm in the 65 plus now, having turned 65 last June, and I would tell you I've got hundreds of friends on Facebook that are in my age range. So a lot of seniors following it as well. Generally, who are we trying to reach? State legislators and policymakers, Idaho water users, general public, age span really from college graduates to retirees, and male and female. So in late January, Megan set up the Facebook page and provided approval from members of the committee to post. We have designated people from each bureau who post content after receiving approval from their bureau chiefs. So all posts must be pre-approved, and this has been a pretty seamless system for the department where The director has not had to be involved in approving posts on a day-to-day basis. Jennifer Strange and Kenzie Thornycroft, also on staff, have developed some cool design ideas and standards for our content. And anyway, after the director approved the policy and guidelines, we met in late January one more time with the committee and decided to move forward. We have a Microsoft Teams site where we have a monthly calendar where we post what we're going to be posting for the bureaus. So the page launched initially in the first week of February. So the initial content ideas for the page included sharing snowpack ski maps on a weekly basis, graphics from the Idaho Water Supply Committee meetings, job openings, upcoming dates for IDWR and water board meetings, share information from department field work, and then sharing information, photos and video from special PR events that we're creating for big money projects with the governor's office. So let's take a look at our page and see what we've been posting so far. So this, let's see, Jennifer had one post. Maybe I should stop. Is there any questions so far?
Steve, how do you keep
How do you keep the people from putting negative comments, and how do you determine whether or not it's a negative comment or constructive criticism?
That's something we don't have a lot of control over. It's kind of more, how do you manage any of those comments if they happen to come up? And so some of the state agencies that have huge traffic on social, like Fish and Game or the governor's office, regularly get those kinds of comments, and then they are screened by their legal staff to determine if they're out of bounds. And so if we have actual guidelines if it does cross the line beyond public comment that should be allowed to something that's defamatory and in that neighborhood. So.
Follow-up question.
Go ahead.
So then you can remove the defamatory ones?
If it's totally egregious and it wouldn't violate free speech guidelines, yes.
Yeah.
We have not had anything like that come up yet.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
we did have a meeting where we had some participation that was quite colorful.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Board Member Cole-Hansen, I'm aware of that. Anyway, our initial post, first one was advertising a water board meeting coming up, Jennifer. And then our first post on the department. Nice picture of Matt by the logo. And
Young there.
so again, it's a visual platform, so you're presenting information that's more visually pleasing and then trying to provide some details about what the department does.
That should be the first one. That's visually please.
Then we had this February 8th City of Nampa partnership event with the governor's office. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Steve, kind of what Joanne was saying, I didn't use Facebook forever, but I have the last couple of years if I want to reach a whole bunch of people pretty fast, and it works well, but you do need to, there are crackpots that you need to be able to screen. And then I don't really care if we have our pictures on there, but if we do, I can get you some from when I was in my 20s or 30s.
Thank you for that. So we had some drone footage to go with that special event video with the governor out in Nampa. Then we posting some adjudication commencement notices. Water board meeting coming up. snowpack map. Water Supply Committee meeting coming up. Swan Falls flows, doing this on a regular basis, let people know how we're doing there. Kenzie put together this really nice graphic to go with the job posting. And so we've been working with Jackie, our HR director, on the job posts. This particular one, I posted a number of graphics from the Water Supply Committee meeting, generally without much more information because those graphics pretty much tell the story. Update from Priest Lake Outlet Dam from Michelle Richmond in Northern Region. Snowpack map, Swan Falls gauge. Groundwater Awareness Week. So I think you guys get the idea. That's the kind of stuff that we're posting on the IDWR side of the page. And it's basically the same information we're sharing with the public, but in different channels. So I just want to show you a couple other Facebook pages from state government. ITD is a big one. They have a lot of big projects. They got 53,000 followers, so they've been engaged for a long time. They have something like 5 people in their PR staff, I think. So they do a lot of good stuff. And anyway, they're posting about highway projects, road closures, even a little bit of humor during March Madness. DEQ. So DEQ is one of our partners, and they're posting about a diesel spill that occurred just this past week. So they're doing daily updates on that. When we had the quagga mussel infestation down in the Snake, the Department of Ag was posting multiple times a day of all the things they were doing down there. Job posts from DEQ. Diesel spill, wood stove Wednesday. Think you get the idea. And I just wanted to share the Idaho water users page. I think they've just been doing a great job with their stuff. Real diversity of things that they're posting. Water supply reports from NRCS, meetings that they're going to, canal safety. Shout out to the women in the industry, World Water Day. So you can see a lot of these are pretty visual and more about the photos. Happy Ag Day. Sharing our post on the snowpack map, etc. Any questions on that stuff?
Questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Dean?
I'm not personally on social media, but, all the people I do business with, whether it's Amalgamated Sugar or most, whoever, that seems to be the way with social media that they communicate and they, put the message out who they are, what they do. I think the way things go, the newspapers aren't, so many aren't even published anymore, TV stuff. I mean, like I said, I'm not personally on it, but I think if you want to get a word out and you want to put yourself in a positive way to the public, that's probably how you're going to go.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, it sounds like you've got policy in place to deal with comments that don't fall in line with free speech. And as long as we can police that and make sure that we don't get disparaged, we'll be okay. I guess the other comment I would have is I don't think we want to diminish our continued alliance with traditional media and putting our information out that way for dinosaurs such as myself who are not on social media.
Mr. Chair, I agree. I mean, we'll continue to do that media outreach in traditional channels, and this would be an additional thing to do. Just to wrap up, I would just say, these were some of the ideas that we had for water board posts. Some kind of initial post on who is the water board and what do they do? And could get some guidance from you guys if you'd prefer that to be more of a text post than with photos. We can do that. Upcoming meetings, recharge updates, I think would be valuable on a weekly basis, and just drive traffic to the cool recharge page we have on our website. Project profiles and aging infrastructure grants, press releases from the water board videos, cloud seeding updates, special PR events, etc. I think the cloud seeding area has been the one area where we've had some negative feedback in several quarters, so not exactly looking forward to that, but we'll see how that goes. I mean, I think it's all good, and it's a good program. So anyway, that's really all I had, Mr. Chairman, and glad to take any other questions or comments.
Any other questions or comments? Joanne?
I like the idea of showcasing our projects on Facebook and would even entertain Instagram as a place to showcase those projects. I think that's a good way to get the information out.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you Dean's got a question.
Another comment, go with what Joanne said. Facebook's a place, but I have kids in their 20s, and Instagram is where they're at too. Yeah, that's all they're. And bringing up another point, a lot of these newspapers, that's where they get their information, the stories. They look for stuff on social media.
Twitter, Instagram, yep. Yes, agreed. And so our strategy was to get started with Facebook, see how that goes. And we could potentially add Instagram down the road, and probably would be a good idea. Okay.
Okay, all right. Is it my imagination, or are we getting some feedback? So do we need to leave our mics off and just utilize the ceiling mics, or what do we need to do? And maybe it's not that annoying.
These ceiling mics are supposed to have been turned off, so we only have these mics. But if we can just mute it, I don't know what else to do. We turn the speakers in this section all the way down.
Okay, I think it's okay. I just hear some feedback. So if the audience is upset about it, we'll try and do something else. Okay. Next item on the agenda, groundwater modeling update.
Sean Vincent. Mr. Chairman, Sean Vincent will provide an update on groundwater investigations and groundwater modeling projects throughout the state.
Okay, good morning, Sean.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a rather abrupt change in topics. We'll do this the old-fashioned way.
Mr. Chairman.
Mark.
I don't think he's doing it the old fashioned way. I don't see a yellow legal pad in his pen out yet. So some of us are more old fashioned than others here.
Fair enough.
Or an overhead projector. Yeah.
Both of which I'm familiar. All right, so we're gonna look at the toolbox today. Let's see. All right, so this is an overview of my presentation today. I'm going to first talk a little bit about the groundwater modeling process. And then I'm going to take you through all of our projects. So quite a bit of material to cover here. We have 4 existing groundwater flow models with the recent release of the Treasure Valley model. And then we have 5 other groundwater modeling projects in various stages of completion. So in terms of the modeling process, we start by trying to define the problem or problems that we're trying to answer. We spend a lot of time in the modeling technical advisory committee discussing modeling objectives, trying to cater the models to whatever questions we're interested in. With that, we move on to conceptual model development. Conceptual models of the aquifer systems are informed by data. And I've listed out a number of different types of data that you can look at there at your leisure. Then we move on to the third step. This is the most time-consuming step in the process, numerical model construction and calibration. This is where we try to take advantage of the brain power we have at the department. We have some really good modelers, Jennifer Succo, Mike McVeigh, Alex Moody. And we also have some pretty high-powered computing equipment. We have a cluster of multi-processor computers that we use for calibration. At IDWR, we apply the models for 2 primary purposes: to facilitate conjunctive administration, which is kind of the purview of the director in the AG's office. And then we also do water resource planning. This is generally of interest to the Water Resource Board. We do, for example, apply the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer model in support of the Managed Recharge Program. And then rather than just set these models up on the shelf, we attempt to maintain their status as best available science in the eyes of the court. It's really important that we maintain that status because we recognize that sometimes these predictions are used in ways that affect the livelihoods of water users. And so we try to recalibrate these models once every 5 years or so. Sometimes it ends up being less frequent and sometimes more frequent. This is that same groundwater modeling process in a flow diagram that was put out by the U.S. Geological Survey. Starting in the upper left, we kind of rotate around clockwise. And the only real difference here is this middle part. There's a bunch of places where it shows that we kind of go back a few steps, reiterate, and that's the important part of this diagram, is that it emphasizes that it's an iterative process. We don't generally end these projects. Whenever we build a model, we should plan on maintaining them in perpetuity. And this is that same modeling process from the eyes of a project manager. Okay, so now on to the modeling projects. We have 9 to cover here. The first one, Spokane Valley Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer Model. This is an interstate resource up in northern Idaho and eastern Washington. The Environmental Protection Agency designated this as a sole source aquifer. It's important for drinking water, so there are some extra protections for groundwater contamination. Because it's an interstate resource, it kind of complicated the initial development of the model. We had on board both the states of Idaho and Washington, the Department of Ecology, IDWR, Washington State University, University of Idaho. Because of that, we brought on the USGS to kind of run interference in that process, and folks out of Menlo Park. Since initial model development back in the early 2000s, we applied the model several times and made some important determinations. But since that time, this is kind of the exception to the we always recalibrate the models paradigm. But we've been kind of on hold with model recalibration by agreement between the states of Idaho and Washington. We do meet annually with Department of Ecology and talk about data trends, talk about whether they want to recalibrate the model. We met in January and they said, no, we're not interested in recalibrating, and we don't have any drive to do that either. And so we're not moving ahead with that. There was a proposal that was discussed at that January meeting from the Idaho, Washington Aquifer Collaborative, and this group is interested in recalibrating the model, but so far, no interest on the part of either of the states. Okay, the second model, and you're all pretty familiar with this one, the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer Model, or ESPAM. The current version was adopted back in 2020. Since that time, we've incorporated that model into the Swan Falls predictive tool, which is used to predict the flows in the Snake River at the near Murphy gauge to evaluate compliance with the Swan Falls Agreement. That current version has also been incorporated into the ESPA transfer tool, and we're in the process of incorporating that version into the Upper Snake Riverware model, which is used here recently to look at cloud seeding benefits, as well as to look at the Milner bypass issue. The next meeting of the Eastern Snake Hydrologic Modeling Committee is in May of this year. Jennifer Succo with staff has been working on recalibrating the model. Version 2.3 of the model is expected in 2025, so that'd be right on target with that once every 5 years recalibration. And this slide is a presentation, or this is a slide from a presentation by Jennifer Succo to the ESHMC. And just to highlight some of the things she's been working on, the ET processing algorithm. She's also been doing some calibration runs with a 1/4 square mile grid. The current model has a 1 mile square grid. This would afford us an opportunity to provide some better definition in certain areas of the model, including the Thousand Springs reach from Kimberly to King Hill, where Neil Farmer has been compiling some geologic data, so we'd like to get that into the model. And of course, we're also, whenever we recalibrate, extending the water budget, which provides us more calibration targets, gives us more confidence in the model and our ability to predict things. Okay, the third existing model is of the Wood River Valley Aquifer System. It was first released in 2016, and shortly thereafter, only 3 years after that, we came out with a new version 1.1 in 2019. The idea there was we had a bunch of high frequency pressure transducer data that we wanted to get into the model calibration, because the data in the original calibration data set were pretty temporally spaced out. So this really improved the calibration. Since that version 1.1 we've applied it for a number of different things here recently. We did some pumping curtailment scenarios for the Basin 37 matter under Director Spackman. We've also used version 1.1 to evaluate some water management actions for the groundwater management area management plan, which is being revised as we speak. That plan is set to sunset here at the end of the calendar year. And so a number of folks are working to put together a new management plan. I'm sure we'll use the model for looking at some of those options. Alex Moody with staff is working on another model recalibration, and we've been working on that here since 2022. Okay, the fourth and final existing model is the new Treasure Valley model. It is a transient model, which means we can do predictions with time as a component of those predictions. It was released in January of last year. Shortly thereafter, we had a training class at the USGS Water Science Center. And the first real model application has been to rerun some recharge scenarios that were done by Brown and Caldwell using the new model. There are 10 scenarios in total, and I have a slide that kind of describes those in your handout. In terms of next steps, data gathering, including the drains in the lower Treasure Valley, is ongoing to support model recalibration, which is what Alan Wiley used to call care and feeding of the model. In particular, we have some canal seepage estimates that weren't available to us when we calibrated the model initially, so we'd like to get those in there. And there is a proposal to combine the Treasure Valley model with the future model of the Mountain Home Plateau that we discussed yesterday in a meeting with the USGS, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. The new Treasure Valley model has 6 layers. The layering is based on the geology, which is really complicated in the Treasure Valley. I've told you guys that before. We also had to look at vertical water level gradients. Sometimes those changes in water levels with depth are indication of a different hydrostratigraphic unit, so that was used also. And this graphic just sort of gives some details on those modeling scenarios that Brown and Caldwell are working on. I think that modeling report is due at the end of the month, so we'll have something to look at least a draft version. Okay, these are now projects which are in various stages of completion where we haven't released yet a new model. The first one I want to talk about is the Big Lost. And of course, that's an important tributary to the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer. The origins of this project kind of go back to a couple of petitions that were filed to the director. The first one in 2016 to establish a critical groundwater area. The second one was to establish a groundwater management area. And in response to these petitions, we initiated a 3-component hydrogeologic study, which was performed in collaboration with the USGS and the Idaho Geological Survey using Department of Energy funds. This is a grant that we applied for and got, the Supplemental Environmental Project grant. We've actually got a couple of those. Craig Tesh has talked about that previously. And using those monies in board funding as well, we've put out 3 USGS scientific investigation reports. On the left is the cover sheet from a hydrogeologic framework report. The hydrogeologic framework, again, is kind of the conceptual model based on looking at the geology and the hydrology. In the middle is a cover sheet on surface water, groundwater interactions. A bunch of seepage surveys and stream flow measurements were made to support that report. And then on the right, some water budget work that was done by the Idaho Geological Survey and reviewed by the USGS. There have been a number of other work products that came out of some of these hydrogeologic studies. A water level monitoring report was put out in 2022, as was a surface and groundwater quality report. A water level contour map was put out in 2023 by the USGS. And Jennifer Succo, in response to a letter to the director, is revising her memo. It's kind of a comprehensive look at the hydrologic trends and in the basin hydrogeology. That memo is currently in review, and we intend to publish that as an open file report. So currently, we are in the process of an actual groundwater model development project, which began in 2022. It's a 3-year study. It was kicked off with the Modeling Technical Advisory Committee in 2022. Also, we've had a number of impact meetings since. Our next one is scheduled for May, and that's going to be at the Moore Valley Community Center up in the Big Lost Valley. Okay, the second ongoing project is the Raft River Valley. This kind of goes back to the designation of a critical groundwater area in 1963. We've been working on this study. We're in the final throes. I believe the deadline for the last report is June 30th of this year. And so we're just wrapping up with some some project status reports for the Department of Energy. It is a 50-50 cost share between the board and Department of Energy. Includes a bunch of well drilling. Mike McVeigh and staff kind of oversaw this well drilling effort. We put in 12 wells as part of that effort, in addition to a bunch of water quality sampling. And we had board funding for development of a water budget and hydrogeologic framework by the Idaho Geological Survey, as well as expansion of the surface water monitoring network, which was performed by the department. And a little bit on the surface water monitoring. There was a gauge, there still is a gauge on the Raft River above 1 mile, which is circled there in red. As part of the project, we added a couple more gauges, one on the Raft River near the mouth and one on Catcha Creek. And then we put in some pressure transducers at 4 other locations, just doing some rated sections. These are sort of lesser flows. There's not a lot of surface water flow, obviously, in the Raft River. We did the best we could. Okay, the third modeling project is of the Mountain Home Plateau. And of course, there's a long history of water level declines here, both a critical groundwater area and a groundwater management area. We've had groundwater declines of in excess of 120 feet during this recent 35-year period in the cinder cone critical area, which is about 3.5 feet a year, which is quite a bit of decline ongoing. So that's a real problem for them. We've also had groundwater declines of about 1.5 feet a year out by the air base, which is in the groundwater management area. And so this map depicts a part of the Mountain Home Plateau that has both the groundwater management area and the critical area. The groundwater management area is that dark blue outline. That's the boundary. The boundary of the critical area is that yellow line, which is wholly encompassed by the groundwater management area. And then there's a little square inset with some contours represented by different colors. Those are lines of equal water level decline. And you can see in the critical area, there's some irrigated agriculture there fed by groundwater. And we've had declines in excess of 120 feet for the period 81 through 2016. So in response to all these water level declines, you might recall that Elmore County, represented by Terry Scanlon, came and gave a presentation, and there was a request made by Mr. Scanlon to expand the Treasure Valley groundwater model to include the Mountain Home Plateau. And in response to that, the board approved a resolution in 2022 to move ahead with this study of the Mountain Home Plateau. And we put in place a joint funding agreement with the USGS for a hydrogeologic framework and water budget, and a separate joint funding agreement for water level synoptic measurements. We also have GIS staff, department staff delineating irrigated lands. We've installed, well, let's see, I think they're out in the field today actually working on a well that's in the critical groundwater area. It's about a 700-foot well, I understand. There are 5 total that are going to be installed as part of this during the field season this year. And we're working with the USGS right now to develop a joint funding agreement for model development. Again, the big question is, should we do a separate model of the Mountain Home Plateau, or should we join the Mountain Home Plateau with the Treasure Valley model for one large model of the entire Western Snake Plain? So there's some advantages and disadvantages associated with both those options. Uh-oh. What did I do? Okay. Fourth project I want to apprise you about is the Camas Prairie. The origins of this project go back to the Big Wood River Groundwater Management Area Advisory Committee term sheet, which included a provision to the director to initiate a study of the Camas Prairie aquifer. This is important because Camas Creek, which is on the Camas Prairie, feeds Magic Reservoir. And so there's concern that groundwater pumping might lower the amount of flow in Camas Creek and have a consequent impact on the fill of Magic. Camas is part of the Big Wood River groundwater management area. So the focus of this study is to kind of determine and document impacts of groundwater pumping on the flow in Camas. And this map depicts the area that I'm talking about. You can see the outline of the Camas Prairie surrounding the town of Fairfield, and to the east is the Wood River Valley, Ketchum and Haley. And then Magic Reservoir sort of there in the center of the map that's being fed both by Camas Creek to the south of Fairfield and the Big Wood River. And there is a joint funding agreement in place for a 4-year study. We've already started that work on Camas Prairie. The drill rig that's on the Mountain Home Plateau is going to move over to the Camas Prairie as soon as they wrap up with their 5th well. And so the scope of work for the Camas Prairie study is listed out there, includes stream flow measurements by staff. Dennis Owsley's been doing a lot of work over there. Some synoptic water level measurements, a hydrogeologic framework, including a geologic model in the software program Aquaworks, some water budget work for both the aquifer and the reservoir, and 5 new monitoring wells with borehole geophysics. That's slated, as I mentioned, for this year. And we are working currently to provide a project update status meeting, a little public outreach. That'll be up in Fairfield sometime later this year. And if you're interested, there is a 2-page project summary on our website with more information about this project. With that, the last of the 9 modeling projects today, the Portneuf study. The impetus for this study is a request from the Surface Water Coalition to administer surface water rights in Water District 29, which includes Portneuf and Marsh Creek, and with the Snake River rights in Water District 1. And so with that request, I think people started thinking about conjunctive management issues. Jennifer Succo took a look and published an open file report back in 2021, and she recommended some additional hydrologic monitoring to support conjunctive management. And the investigation that's come out of that is focused on the watershed above the Portneuf Gap, where we're lacking a lot of data. And so the investigation includes a bunch of tasks I've listed out there, including delineating aquifer boundaries, upgrading the monitoring network for water levels, a synoptic water level measurement, or 3 synoptic water level measurements, some new stream gauges, seepage surveys, and water budget work that's being done by the USGS. And so this Gantt chart, which was created and updated by Amy Steinke with staff, it extends from 2010 FY through 2027. And it shows the different projects that I just described. There are the 4 existing models at the top, and it shows where we are in the process. Every time there's a number, that's a model number that's come out. And then on the bottom, we have the 5 ongoing projects where we've yet to create a model, but we're kind of setting the groundwork for model development in the future. And so with that, I'd like to just thank the board for your ongoing support. These models are really important to the water users as well as the department. So thank you for that, and I'll stand for questions.
Yeah, I think we'd all like to thank you for your efforts. You're the one that's doing all the heavy lifting, you and your team. So thank them. Any questions for Sean? Brian.
Mr. Chairman, Sean, you probably said, but maybe I didn't hear, when you expect enough of a report on the Camas to work into that new Big Wood agreement that will happen next year?
Yeah, it's going to be a little while, Mr. Chairman, Member Olmstead. I think we started that just last year, And it's a 4-year study, so it won't be till 2027 till we have a final product, although we might have information that could feed into the process prior to that time.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Patton, water supply meeting?
Water supply update.
Oh.
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
And
Okay,
David Holcomb is gonna update the board on water supply conditions throughout the state.
okay, we'll get David's presentation up. Welcome, David. You've done a really good job the last 6 weeks. Our compliments to you.
Yeah, I've been doing some hard work there. Must have been a little lazy getting going, though.
Vice Chair Cole-Hansen said that you need to go up to Northern Idaho and do a little heavy lifting up there.
Yeah, we do need some heavy lifting up there. So it sounds like I'm gonna give the whole water supply meeting today, so brace for it. Here we come. So yeah, just to reemphasize, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, the Northern Idaho, we have some significant drought. And so as I go through this presentation, we're gonna start with the good news and we'll end with the bad. So anyways, that's kind of where the drought monitor map is for the state. The orange is severe drought and the brown is moderate drought. The yellow indicates kind of borderline, getting close to drought. So if we look at snowpack conditions across the western United States, this is a really classic El Nino winter as far as the Southwest getting hit hard with good snowpack and the Northwest kind of missing out, especially when you get up into the Puget Sound area where the signal's really strong. Across southern Idaho, if the storm systems drift a little north, we get the benefit. If the storm systems come in a more southerly direction with the strong jet stream, then we can miss out. But as you can see in this graph, the Snake River basin is kind of the border between the good water and the poor water conditions. So, but we started off with low snowpack across the state on January 1st. These are percentiles shown here. Wherever it's a 0, that indicates it's record-setting low for that time of year. And you can see with the Clearwater Basin, it's record-setting low all the way until about February 19, and then it's been edging upward. It's still in what we would consider a severe drought situation just from a snowpack perspective, but we're also seeing the forecast coming in line with the snowpack. So we have some significant water issues on the Clearwater and the Spokane. But you can see the rest of the states improved dramatically, especially as you go further south with pluvial conditions kind of along that southern border with Utah and Nevada. If you look at the overall conditions this winter, it's been a warm winter. We're in the top 10th percentile across the state. And then if you look at precipitation, it more or less follows the drought map we saw earlier. Really dry up in the headwaters of the Clearwater. And then the SPEI map, which is my favorite drought index, because it includes both the temperature side and the precipitation side. Right now it matches precipitation because in the winter temperature isn't as large a factor as it is through the summer. And so if you look, and these graphs bring us up through February. So if we look at March, since we're not quite done with March, we can look at some data from the Northwest River Forecast Center. And thankfully, March has been a little bit cool, especially in southern Idaho. It helps when it helped to build that snowpack. So you can see the precipitation too also came in those dark blue colors on the right. Has really hit the Snake River Basin quite nicely. But the storm tracks have really, just like the rest of the winter, have really missed the northern part of the state. So that's kind of the overall view of the state. Now we're going to start with the good news and work our way from the Bear River Basin up to Priest Lake. So if you look at what's going on at Bear Lake right now, for those not familiar with the Bear system, the Bear River runs to the north. Water is diverted down the Rainbow Inlet Canal. They've got about 829 CFS coming through that canal. A little more than that spilling from Mud Lake into Bear Lake, fill Bear Lake. And of course, they've got the outlet canal shut down so that they can get the lake full. And you can see they got their first big wave of runoff. This is the 10-day forecast from the Colorado River Forecast Center, which covers the Bear River Basin. And you can see in January, they were predicted to have a little below average runoff if you look at the median forecast. By March 1st, they were right at median, and now they're starting to climb above that. And we see that pattern throughout the southern border region. And so if we look at the Bear River Basin as a whole from a snowpack perspective, the purple line represents 2023, the green line 2022, and we're kind of right in between those two conditions, coming in right at median. This graph doesn't show up very well on the screen there, but if you look at the side screens, you can see that the green bar is kind of the normal condition, and that green X represents the typical median where the snowpack peaks. And that X is based on the period of record. And so the rest of this distribution is based on the 91 to 2020 normal. And so you can see in the Bear River Basin, the most recent normal is quite a bit lower than period of record, because that green X is toward the top of the green bar. Anyways, we're kind of right in between, right around normal conditions. If you look at Bear Lake, which is the major storage in the system for the lower portion of the Bear in Idaho and Utah, in 2020, there's basically almost no inflow into the reservoir from 20 into 21. And in 2021, they pretty much used their whole allocation. So you can see this is a multi-year reservoir system. And then they got a little bit of fill, but not much runoff actually getting into the lake. 2022 was a cooler year. The demand wasn't quite as high, but they dipped below this 5911 value, which cuts off diversions into reservoirs, some reservoirs upstream of Bear Lake. But then 2023, they had great runoff. And now they're getting close to what's called the Pacific Core target elevation. And that's where they want to be under normal conditions at flood control. And so then they'll push it up toward trying to get the lake full from April 1st, beginning of runoff. So we might begin to see some flood control there, depending on how Pacific Core is viewing the oncoming climate. And what we'll see toward the end of the presentation when we look at the outlook is it's not too bad of an outlook so far. We might get a little wetter in that area. So the Snake River Basin, we'll move into the upper Snake River Basin, and this is the headwaters of the Snake. Again, we're falling right between past 2 years, coming in just a little lower than average. We have some precipitation coming up that might push us toward average, hopefully, but not doing too bad on the upper Snake. You can see the forecast has really climbed since the low around January 8, and it's got just, the median has got just a little bit above average. If you look at the joint forecast for March 1st, it was 3.3 million acre feet. The NRCS was 2.9. The Northwest River Forecast Center was 3.7. And now the Northwest River Forecast Center for March 26 is bumped up to 4 million acre feet. So it's gone up about 250,000 acre feet. And you'll notice typically in southern Idaho along the southern border, the NRCS tends to have a little bit lower forecast, whereas the Northwest River Forecast Center tends to be a little higher. And that's because the Northwest River Forecast Center is more based on the antecedent soil moisture conditions, whereas the NRCS is more focused on snowpack. So if you're using the NRCS forecast, I'd probably go a little up in the forecast as far as what I would expect. If I was using the Northwest River Forecast Center, I might just pull it down a little bit, and that's what they did in the joint forecast. Northern Idaho, that situation flips. So we can see the reservoir system is pretty close to full in the upper Snake River Basin, and on March 22nd, the Bureau began spilling water past Milner as flood control operations have started. And you can see the bottom graph is the Portnoy River Basin, since nobody probably knows what WTXI is. That's the Portnoy at Topaz. It's just starting to get that runoff signal. If you go up to the headwaters above Jackson, it'll be another month probably till we see that melt signal start in the stream flow. And so the reservoir system has a little over 4 million acre feet. You can see it's starting to flatten out as the flood control operations begin, as they try to save a little space before major runoff kicks in. If we go along now we're gonna look at the tributaries to the south side. The NRCS forecast year is from March 1. They don't do a daily forecast. And then the Northwest River Forecast Center is the most recent daily forecast as of yesterday. And so you can see on the south side of the Snake, they're following that really wet pattern we saw from 2023. We are likely to bump up. I don't think we'll get quite as high as we did last year. We're not seeing that kind of signal coming in yet, but they have a really strong snowpack along the southern side. If you look at the Salmon Falls tract, the reservoir there south of Twin Falls, 2021, they cut the irrigation season a little early because they ran out of water. 2022, again, they had to cut a little early. Or sorry, that was 2021, 2022, 2023, they had a full irrigation season, and now the runoff signal is just starting to hit that reservoir, and they're predicting as of March 1st, 80,000 acre feet, but the most recent Northwest River forecast is around 92. So they're gonna fill the reservoir probably at least as high as they did last year, and they should be able to get a full irrigation season there. And then if we go to the north side of the Snake River Plain and we look at the Big Wood Reservoir, the snowpack above the Big Wood or Magic Reservoir, sorry, not the Big Wood Reservoir, Magic Reservoir is the snowpack above that is coming in right at median. We may get a little bump here in the next week or two. Both of these last years have had a really late runoff. I don't know if we're going to get if we can have that expectation that'll be as late this year, but it's going to delay a little bit beyond average as we have some cooler temperatures coming in. And if we look at Magic Reservoir, they had a miserable year in 2021. They ran out of storage before July. 2022, just after July, they ran out of storage, or after the 1st of July. But then 2023, they got a good water year with good carryover, and the level of the reservoir, the USGS doesn't provide real-time updates, but the canal company does. And so they're at 160,000, and with a normal snowpack, they're gonna have no trouble at all filling the reservoir system. Over here is the Mackey Reservoir. They ran out of water in 2021, right after the start of July. And then in 2022, they had a full irrigation season. And then last year, of course, they had the gate issue, so they had to drain the reservoir down. But because they really they got the brunt of the remnants from Hurricane Hillary in August, their soil moisture profile really got a boost. And so their base flows have been really high. And it looks like they're in decent condition to perhaps fill that reservoir this year. If we look at, now we're moving into the western Snake River Basin. On this side, we have the Boise. On the right side, we have the Boise and Payette. You can see the reservoir systems are pretty full, and amazingly in eastern Oregon, for the first time in many years, we've got a full reservoir system across most of the state there, including the Hawaii, which provides water to portions of Idaho. And so if we look at the western Snake River Basin, we'll start with the Boise Basin. It again looks a lot like the Snake. We're coming right in between the last two water years, just a little below average. But our reservoir content is in great shape. They started flood control operations on, it looks like March 25th. They started releasing a little past. You can see in the graph, there's about 1,000 CFS being released out of Lucky Peak, and it's missing the Middleton gauge there, but the Middleton gauge over here, we can see it's getting close to 2,000, and they try to keep that at 250. Anytime the Middleton gauge goes up, it's either got to be flow augmentation water or flood control operations. So that's a good point of reference if you want to know whether flood control operations are ongoing or not. So they've started flood control operations. They're going to need some space to take in the upcoming runoff. If we go to the Payette Basin, it's following much closer to 2022, which we really got saved by a long, cool spring. Thankfully, the Payette Basin rarely has water shortages, but we're going to have to keep our eye there a little bit. They could have a little bit of a tight year. Because the Payette and the Weezer are right beyond that border where we go into the dry zone as you head north. If we look at the Weezer Basin, again, they were right at 2022. They're now climbing a little bit. But I don't think we'll get quite that delay in runoff we had in 2022. So they'll probably have a year that's not quite as good as 2022 this year, unless we have a significant delay. Now, if you switch across to the other side, you head south, things get much better on the Hawaii, and they're right on target with last year. And they might get another little bump here coming in, probably not as high as the purple, but it's possible they could maybe even outdo the purple this year. There is the probability. So they're in excellent shape. If you look at the reservoir condition, it's very likely they'll fill the reservoir. So if you want to go out and see the glory hole, this is a great year to do it. And then we'll move into the lower Snake River Basin, which includes the Salmon River and the Clearwater. And so this is where we're really seeing issues. There's more than there's a 90% probability that we won't hit median runoff in the Salmon Basin. And I was kind of interested if there was any variability across it. And if you look at the Lemhi, which is shown in that bottom snowpack graph versus the whole salmon system, they're very similar. So the Lemhi has pretty low snowpack. It's on the border of the normal region, but depending on temperature, will depend on how fast it runoff comes off, and we could have some issues on the Lemhi. Here's the Clearwater. This has been the most struggling basin. You can see they were setting new records all the way from starting in December until just before March. They've come up. They're still below the 10th percentile on snowpack. well, I guess it's not the 10th percentile here. They're at the 10th percentile right now, which is right at the border of severe drought conditions, and the forecasts are lining up with that. So if you look at the forecast, that the Clearwater at Spalding is quite a bit below normal. We're probably not going to see, and this basin has a really hard time recovering. So sometimes in Idaho, you can get a really wet spring that recovers a basin. Well, the Clearwater is not one of those. It gradually builds snowpack. You rarely ever see, a spike. So they're in tough shape, and they're going to stay in tough shape unless something really highly unusual happens. If we go to northern Idaho, we've got two maps here. The one on the left is SNOTEL sites by percentile. You can see in Montana, there's some records being set in the Pend Oreille and the Clark Fork portion of that basin that flows into Pend Oreille Lake. And then down in the Clearwater area, we've got some pretty low percentiles, definitely in the severe drought category. But it gets a little better as we head up toward Priest Lake. You can see over here, these are the forecasts, and they're lining up pretty well with what we're seeing for snowpack, which makes sense. That's kind of what drives our runoff. And so this is kind of just gives a view of the difficult situation in northern Idaho. The Spokane River at Spokane is going to be much below median. Really, at this point, no probability of recovery, as is the Pend Oreille. It's quite a bit below median. But Priest Lake, there's still a small probability we'll get median runoff. And that's just because the snowpack, just as we get up to the Canadian border, is a little bit better. It's in the sweet spot, if you can say there's a sweet spot in northern Idaho. And with that, we'll look quickly at the outlook. This is the 10-day QPF. This is what we expect to accumulate over the next 10 days based on a whole ensemble of forecast models. And it doesn't look good for the next week. So we've got a couple days of precipitation coming in. We're experiencing now northern Idaho is going to be wet for a couple more days. And then we're expected to dry out. But the good news is when we get out to 8 to 14 days, we got another wave of precipitation expected to come in. And if we look temperature, we're going to be near normal in northern Idaho and then swing over into quite a bit cooler than normal. At least that's the forecast for now. And that will help. Maybe we'll get a little bit of a boost that will push some of those basins that are right on the border of normal back toward normal. And so as long as we don't stay too cool too long, this might be some good news to end on, since we mostly ended on the bad news. Chairman or members of the board, are there any questions?
Okay, board members, questions for David?
Sure. David, El Nino is dissipating now, or is it? I mean, the next weather.
Yeah, Chairman Raybould and member Van Stone, we're swinging really hard into a La Nina. There's a pretty good probability next year will be a La Nina, which is good for the Pacific Northwest generally speaking, although the signal's pretty mixed in southern Idaho. But yeah, we are moving out of a pretty strong El Nino into what could potentially be a pretty strong La Nina.
Need more precipitation going back?
In northern Idaho, in southern Idaho, probably it's a pretty good bet. We're kind of in that border zone right between El Nino and La Nina in southern Idaho. So, but it is a little bit of a stronger signal with the La Nina in southern Idaho. And southern Idaho, we have no El Nino signal. But because sometimes the Snake River's like this year, we just caught it. And some years it's below. And so it's kind of all over the map with El Nino. But La Nina is a little wetter than normal, typically, but not a strong signal in southern Idaho.
Fall should be in El Nino.
We should be in La Nina by fall.
Any other questions? Dean?
So looking at the upper snake, it had a pretty good, the base flows coming in all winter were pretty good.
Yep.
Even before we, even starting out November, they were above normal.
Yeah.
You got any ideas on where that comes from or?
Yeah, a large part of that had to do with Hurricane Hillary coming up. When it hit California, there was a large kind of offshoot of that came up in August up into southern Idaho, and it pretty much stopped right at the headwaters of the Upper Snake Basin. It went a little higher up into Montana, but not much. And so we got a tremendous amount and we had cool weather, or the evaporative demand dropped a lot, and then we got a lot of precip. And so that really has set base flows in a strong condition. Plus, we had a cool spring last year. So and last year was cooler than normal overall. So it really, that's kind of the driver behind those strong base flows. When you get a huge precipitation event late in the year, typically it has to be in September, but the remnants from Hurricane Hillary were so intense that even though it hit in August, it really benefited the state. And once you look at where that hurricane, those remnants came in, the base flows just statewide across southern Idaho just took a big jump and have stayed high since. So maybe in the future, if California gets more hurricanes, Idaho will have better base flow. Yeah, that probably doesn't help the grain.
Yeah, I think Dean and I are both suffering with the fallout from that, but
Yeah.
we're water people and we live in the desert, so we take it when it comes. Anything else for David, board? Okay, thank you, David. Very comprehensive report, much appreciated. I think maybe we'll take about a 10-minute break, try and reconvene about 10 on that clock. Yeah, thank you. Oh, on your, above your wrist. Hey, folks, if we can kind of start, if the board members would start drifting back towards this end of the room. Don't worry. Well, audience. You must make money. That's what it is. That's what happens.
Maybe a little. But he won't. He doesn't share with me. So you throw it up, you want to-
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to reconvene the meeting while we're getting this next presentation set up. Director Weaver has a couple of comments. We could give him a minute.
Yeah, thanks, Director. And I do have a bit of a cough this morning, so I'm going to Zoom the rest of this meeting, but I did want to just take the opportunity to recognize Sean Vincent for his work here at the department. You heard a presentation to him this morning on groundwater models. He's given that presentation and other similar technical presentations for many years. I think it's common knowledge now that Sean gave his notice of retirement, and I think that's coming up this spring. You probably won't see him at another board meeting in his current position with the department. And so just my thanks to Sean for your support of this group. You're one of the best technical presenters and communicators that we have at the department, and I'm gonna miss working with you and hearing your summaries, Sean.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Director Weaver, and thank you, Sean. We can't hold an official vote as a board today in this work session, but I'm pretty sure tomorrow we're going to vote to reject your letter of resignation. You just presented work into 2027. I think you're obligated to stay till that's done.
Didn't realize the consequences of that. Thank you.
No, we really do appreciate you, appreciate all of our staff. We know we got a good, hardworking group of people and the work will go on, but I don't think for a minute we won't miss you because we do use the models. They help this board immensely, and thank you very much. Okay, are we ready to go? Okay, all right. Stream and return flow monitoring.
Mr. Chairman and the board, thanks for the opportunity to present an update and a general overview of the department's Eastern Snake Plain Surface Water Monitoring Program. I'm Colin McKeel and
Tito Sanabria.
We worked together on this program. It started before us by a long shot in 2008 with Michelle Richmond and others. But we've had the opportunity to work on it more recently. So we'd like to go ahead and continue on here with a presentation outline. We'll just hit a few points. The purpose of the data collection, an overview of the department's collaboration and monitoring program, the equipment and methods employed and IDWR's radio network. Along with the data infrastructure, that's all the necessary components to keep a large network like this running, and we'll end on a look forward to the next several years. So like I had mentioned before, the program's been running for 16 years. It started out with the intent to support the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer model through calibration targets and gain calculations. There's been other benefits to the department along the way over that time period. Station 10 on the Littlewood, for instance, is supporting both the model calibration and the Bigwood groundwater management plan. most recently. There's a variety, there's more points than are shown on this map that are included in the ESPAM work. That are supported through cost sharing with the USGS and sites that are contracted out through other groups. But the sites we're gonna talk mostly about today are the monitoring stations that the department either independently operates or operates in collaboration with irrigation entities. So cooperative agreements and collaboration make this large number of sites possible. We work with all the groups shown on this figure, and the level of collaboration or the nature of the collaboration varies from group to group. But the underlying theme is always that there's some mutual benefit to both parties involved. A lot of times that takes the form of cost sharing or infrastructure sharing, use of existing infrastructure, or development of otherwise unengaged sites. And sometimes that extends all the way down to the individual water users if there's monitoring locations that are important to the ESPAM program. Here's a general breakdown of the way the data from the individual surface water monitoring sites gets to our department. We have a large chunk of the sites covered through irrigation groups and the tribes networks. And that was because when the program started, it makes use of the existing SCADA systems or radio networks that were already in place. As a means of saving funding, not being overly redundant. IDWR developed a radio network too in order to fill in gaps, a lot of times with cell coverage and things like that over time. The telemetry is extremely important for surface water monitoring sites to catch high and low extreme flows with the gauges, pick up on battery power. A lot of these sites are solar powered. So we can, and I guess, identify issues with sensors before they cause data outages. So telemetry checks all the boxes, increases data quality, and increases the quality of data calibration. Here's a rough breakdown of the types of the flow estimates that exist in the system. You can see a large fraction of flow is estimated through stage discharge relationships, which mean that a department hydrologist goes out and makes a physical flow measurement every 6 weeks. We've got a lot of weirs in the system as well, flow structures and flow meters that maybe take less labor after the devices are installed or built out and are up and running. And then in the lower portion of the slide, we've got just a general summary of the types of sensors that are included in the network. And as technology increases and things kind of phase out and phase in, and the program moves along with it. I'll hand it off to Tito here for description of a couple of our sites here as an example.
Good morning, everyone. So if you look at the slide on the left, this is down at Dock Creek in Merle. We're using this as an example. So I came on board in 2017. The program was already up and running, and we were handed, a bunch of infrastructure, a bunch of sites, and we also were able to assist water district to get them up and running. From there, we had other areas that we needed to really develop. Like Burley, Aberdeen, helping the tribe over at Fort Hall more. And then the biggest challenge for us was developing the hub at Twin Falls, Southern. And that allows us to activate the link up to Jerome Butte, which gave us the whole southern side, all the way out to Buell, overlapping Haven, and all the way out recently to milepost 29 and 31. You look at this box on the left, you'll see there's a little antenna on top of the station. That's an omnidirectional antenna. Reason we went with that instead of a directional antenna from there back to data collection hub was because after we designed the network, they built a barn, metal barn right to the left of us. So it made it a little challenging to get the signal over the barn. And the other reason was we had to go with a short antenna because aesthetics was a big issue with the land and the property owners on the lake. So they wanted us to be as invisible as we could. So we worked with the client, keep things neat and, you know, less impact to the environment as we would normally. So then from there, you can see that there's, you got the control, you got the station, and then right below it, there's a wheel blade. And then we put, this particular station, we used a Bobler sensor. So we ran, the orifice is right above the wheel blade. The fish will be there later on this year. And then as we look inside the box, you'll have a radio. We're using a spectrum technology mostly, which is 902 to 928 megahertz. Some of the limitations is I'm used to working with 350 watt radios, and these are 1 watt radios. The terrain in Idaho is challenging as well. We have a lot of canyons to get in, you know, and get over. Right to the below that is the sensor is a bubbler. And then we have the data logger. Data logger has a program that we write in-house. And by the way, all these components we buy from different vendors. We assemble all the boxes. We try to build them all the same. And the programs are custom made so that we can select, like in this particular instance, we're using an SDI 12 input for our signal. Some places we use 4 to 20, and some places can be pulse input as well. So all that happens in the box. So we collect the data every 15 minutes, it stores it. This particular one is looking at the gauge height. We can also look at water temperature. And inside the data logger, there's a built-in sensor so we can monitor the actual air temp at the station, which is very important to us. If you look to the right, that is the new hub over at Burley that we built last year, 2 years ago. There's our antenna up on the top for the radio, and then the cellular antenna below it, and then our electronic equipment is right below that. Folks at Burley Irrigation District allow us to co-locate our telemetry equipment on a lot of their tower sites. So it gives us a real huge cost benefit. We also have a secure place to keep our hub, and I'm going to explain really quickly what a hub does. So when you build a radio network, there's a couple of ways to do it, and go to the next slide. There's a couple of ways to do it, and we have, this is the coverage maps, about 70% on the green, and the yellowish is kind of 50% or less, and that is generated by a program called Radio Mobile. So we can run modeling on the radio signal of the network. We have developed what is called a hybrid cellular radio network. So instead of using a bunch of cellular modems at every single well or at every single location, what we've done is we created like a party line, if you would, way back. So we can take and share one modem to multiple radios. So we can have, for example, in Hagerman, Hagerman's running about 4 repeaters out of that hub. You set up the cellular to radio interface, which allows us to talk to all these radios. And we're talking to about 20 radios for about $18 a month. So we're keeping the cost down by doing it this way, instead of doing a one-to-one. As the coverage continues to grow, then we're able to add additional sites into our coverage area without having to build another hub or another net. For example, last couple months, we just almost done with post 29 and 31 recharge, and those came off our southern hub in Twin Falls to our Jerome Butte repeater.
Member Cole-Hansen.
If one of the hubs goes down, does that take out all of the party lines?
Right. Mr. Chairman, good question. So the reason we broke the network into hubs was for that same reason. If you have one gigantic network, right, let's say Verizon or and you lose one part, if you lose your main link, then you're done, right? So unless you have some redundancy. Well, here what we've done is we've created a bunch of smaller networks that become a large network. So say we lost a hub at Twin Falls, for example. All that means is that the telemetry would be down, but the data collection at each monitoring site, it just continues to go and go and go. The data loggers are programmed to take a sample. We take a sample every 30 seconds, but we store a reading every 15 minutes. Every hour, we have the server in Boise go out to all these hubs that have static IP addresses that are talking to these radios, to all these devices out there throughout Idaho, from Murphy, all the way up to Rexford, north of Rexford. So if you were to lose that one hub, all you're losing is the telemetry. So the data collection still, it's safe, nothing's lost, because the data loggers can store about 2 years of information. So I just need about 2 years to get out and fix it.
Go ahead.
It looks like your box, your hub box is probably a locked cabinet. And, do you have any type of bad actors who want to break into these places and steal the batteries?
Vandalism. There's lots of vandalism, yes.
We've had 2 cases of vandalism with this large number of sites in the past 7 years. It was more back. It's relatively low occurrence.
But
The
yes,
boxes are not necessarily.
people will want to shoot the solar panels. That happens. We've had stations that would, somebody was walking to the site, Rock Creek and Register Rock. We just got that back up. That was my first install when you guys hired me. And they basically went in, destroyed the station, tore our wiring, took the cellular gateways. They just completely demolished it. So we went back, talked to the Parks and Rec folks, and we're trying to see if we can provide them Wi-Fi out of our box to the local system so we can get some security cameras in place. And at least, give us a little hand, because it happens. But back to your first question is, we will not lose the data. It's gonna be there. We just gotta get the telemetry link back up.
And out west of Hagerman on this coverage map shows Water District 2. That's Tito supports that group as well.
Yeah, VHF. So that one's running a different technology altogether, which is VHF is really nice for this profile in Idaho because our terrain, the way the topography is, which creates a lot of challenges for us, whether we're going to transmit above the canyon or inside the canyon. Next slide. There was one more thing. That's right. So Water District 2, we applied the same concept that we did to the ESPA program, building a lot of hubs that can handle a bunch of units and do the work. Another thing that we did was you are able to minimize the amount of time you key these radios out and how frequent your communications are up and running. We don't want to run the radios a lot at night when we're not generating photovoltaic energy. And, put a hamper on our batteries, you're beating up your radios, things can only last so long. So we kind of stretched that. We rewrote the programs, condenses for bubblers. So now we've moved them up to, instead of 1 minute, they kind of take a break for 4 minutes. Every 5 minutes, they cycle the pump, get more life out of that. But we applied the same thing to Water District 2. We're able to take 2 other tower sites in Grandview, and we're paying about $1,000 a month for rental fees for a tower site. 2 tower sites. We took those out and we were able to work with the local ranchers and the local irrigation and canal companies who are wonderful to work with, and develop 4 of our own hubs within their network. And now it's costing us under $100 a month for the same thing. All the data gets handled in-house. Everything is in-house. So as we kept building this, the planning group came on and they wanted Outpost 29 and 31. As soon as we got the Jerome Butte up and running, we had enough coverage to get those sites in. And this is just demonstrating some of the topography. It just looks weird. So the bridge over 93 is not like that. Which is, I think that was Evel Knievel that did that. But what we were trying to demonstrate, this is before, Colin and I took over. So we had, this network was already in place, and what happened was they couldn't get the signal down in that canyon to hit all the sites down at Pristine Springs. And, you know, the configuration, we've modified it since then, but as you can see, we're transmitting from the hub at Pristine Springs down in the bottom of the canyon, which has really good cellular coverage. There's the golf course there, of course. And we're able to connect all our radios through there. The other benefit we're able to do is as we keep increasing our network coverage, we're able to take a lot of those cellular modems that we had deployed in the beginning, because it's the quick solution, is just to do internet, and go back to the radio. So we're able to start taking those costly monthly fees away from the network and just going back with the radio, which is easier for us to deploy. Next one. So this would be this is after we installed this is just from the hub at our southern office in Twin Falls. So we, what is that, 5-story building? So we're about 60 feet up on top of the roof. We have the hub there. So you have, again, just cellular to radio interface. And another thing that we do at the hubs that we didn't do before in our repeater sites, we implemented diagnostics. So we are able to check the pulse on all the electronics, all the telemetry on real time, all the time. So when something goes wrong, Colin, we get an email and we'll see it on the board. So there are alarms set up for that. So when you're looking at just this one station, it has a pretty large footprint. And then if you can imagine, that's just one station giving you that green coverage map, but it can't get quite down into the canyon. So we went ahead and developed a link between there, 30 miles north up to Jerome Butte, and that almost tripled our coverage footprint. And then from Jerome Butte, then we're able to handle the Buell area with another repeater, so we can get into like Cedar, Joel, Cooley, and that whole side of Buell, and down in the bottom of the canyon. And then on the going east, we can get out to milepost 29 and 31, which became available since now we have the footprint of the coverage.
Yeah, but the comparison of two stations, one extremely limited by topography, the other benefiting from the generally gradual topography staying place.
So line of sight. So look at it that way. If you took a flashlight and you opened it, and you have the floodlight, that looks like an omnidirectional antenna. And if you put it like a little laser pointer, that would be more like a directional antenna. Yeah, but there are limitations to both.
Tito, so on the Jerome Butte, are you on the Twin Falls Tower, Twin Falls Canal Company Tower?
It was operated by White Cloud.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
The taller ones there. I just wondered if you went to the Twin Falls one.
That one is, see, that's a 60-foot tower, and I think we're up at 27 feet, pretty sure. We're running omnidirectional antenna from there. So a lot of things we're going to get into this one. It depends where you are in the network, and we can determine what equipment we're going to use to make things talk to each other. And to get there, first what happens is Colin will come out and say, hey, we need to build a network in Burley. So we tried to find a location in the network. First, we run it on paper. We have a modeling program. So we can settle the latitude and longitude, all the coordinates for all the sites, and then start to develop a relationship between, what's my coverage area? How far can I see, from the hub? How far can I see from all the sites? Do I need to use a repeater? What kind of antennas are we going to use? Oh, wow, we're going to have an interference problem. Or now we're on the side of this big, tall oak tree here, and the shading's too much. I need to look to the south, do I have a clear path for my photovoltaic energy, so I don't have to, do I need to use a bigger solar panel, bigger batteries? So all these things will happen here. And this is the fun stuff for me. This is the part I really enjoy most. So when we build a link, basically, so from the hub, it's going to be omnidirectional, if you would. And when you go, like, say, from the hub all the way out east to, say, F Waste, that would be what, exit 216, I think, right, early. So that's our longest path there. And, the program lets us figure out which way to point the antennas, which direction, how much gain. And let's see what else did I miss?
Yeah, and this was that, again, most recent network, nature of the collaboration there is by way of tower sharing and water measurement device. Just as an example. You got it?
Yep, I just thought of it. So the beauty of this is that the 900 megahertz network lets us configure the radios in 3 configurations, right? So we can make the radios a monitoring station, or you can make the radio, for example, if you go all the way to the east, that will be a waste and Burley. And say we wanted to develop around that area and put some, say, we had some wells there, we had some other stations. Well, we can just turn that thing into dual mode, turn it to a repeater. We don't have to buy anything, it's already there. So to add more links and expand our coverage, it's much easier than it was in the years before that. Yeah. So we want more radio and less cellular.
And now, with this large number of sites, you gotta have data infrastructure in place to handle the amount of information coming in. This is a really simplified block diagram that illustrates 2 streams of data. The first is the field network, which Tito was just showing as an example of early irrigation on the previous slide. So the individual gray boxes kind of represent monitoring stations that will be monitoring flows with either stage or flow data. That data all transfers via radio link to a centralized cellular hub. The second stream of data comes from our field hydrologists, which go out, visit the sites, make flow measurements, site observations, general maintenance, and they go to the field with a field data application. They transmit their data through their cell phones or through a cellular link. Both of which then are directed to the Boise server here. The monitoring data from the individual stations goes through telemetry software where we have the ability to apply an automated review process. So it will look for extreme values, faulty sensors, minimum maximums for the season or period of record. Before anyone gets a chance to look at it. Data from there is transferred over to a database which collects the field observations and allows us to apply calibrations to the time series data and produce flow estimates based on whether or not the site's a weir or a rated section, allows us to maintain station discharge ratings. From there, data is transferred over to our web portal where the data is available to the general public and internal users. So in 2023, we met with the Eastern Snake Plain and Aquifer Modeling Committee and asked them essentially for feedback on whether or not the system had reached a satisfactory level as far as sites that are to be incorporated into the model for various purposes. The general consensus from them was that we were at more or less pretty close to complete level. There probably won't be a big uptick in number of sites, for instance, but more or less maybe a site here and there that either is added or dropped off from the network. So we're shifting into maintenance mode with the sites. Some of the equipment beginning in 2008, some of the equipment's original still. So we look to maintain that, replace small components as they need to be replaced, make upgrades where they're needed occasionally. The previous presentation that Sean Vincent had delivered talked about a variety of other groundwater models that the department's working on. Each of those tributary basins to the Snake Plain Aquifer will benefit from the same types of data that the ESPAM has over the years. So we will be evaluating expanding this program into those tributary basins, applying the same collaborative monitoring approach in the next years to come, I guess. So, does anyone have any questions?
Pat,
Tito or Colin, the network that you're using is strictly for data acquisition for information, and there's no control
Correct.
work being done, so it's not susceptible to Chinese hackers or anything.
That's correct.
Okay. That's good. It's a well thought out system as well.
Yeah, Spectrum is ultra secure. It was developed by the Department of Defense.
We can encrypt it pretty heavily too.
Yeah, and on top of that, encryption's gotten better, so it's super secure for a lot of bang for your buck, I guess, is one way of putting it. But it has relatively low interference in the field as another example, just kind of general data security.
You're using you're using frequency hopping, right? So you have a bank of about say hundreds of channels that are available to you, and then you pick a key number. You have 15, 16 keys. Those keys have a certain pattern, and it determines which channels are going to be used, just like sound works. So that way you can get you can send multiple communications. We can all be on the phone at the same time, but it goes out in packets. And Colin might be talking to channel 1, I'm getting 800 audio, 500, but then it changes. Same way we do it. One thing I wanted to say was we took over right off the bat was, Sean hired me and was like, yeah, we're gonna go out and take a look at this network first and find out what needs help, learn how it was built. We pretty much reverse engineered it really quickly, and we're able to get Water District 2 off the ground as well. And then the ESPA needed all these new networks added, and we just kept going east. Twin, Burley, now we're finishing up Aberdeen. But as we were using the data that is coming in, the diagnostics has been a huge part. And we really want to have that because we want to know when things are going wrong before they happen. When you asked earlier about the alarm, we get an alarm too. When they vandalize the box, we know that it happens on a Sunday afternoon after 4 p.m. So we're watching a football game and, let's go break this box. So we actually have a pretty good idea when things do happen. So we can do that. But some of the other things that we benefited from a financial standpoint was that not only did we cut back on tower sites that we can now share with the water users or the ranchers or every canal companies, but it's also the things that we have learned. So one of the problems was in the beginning, our power supplies, I think, were designed by Cole-Hansen themselves, and they did the same thing when I was over at ARS. They were under the sun, small, tiny little solar panels, tiny little batteries, and your state of charge, the batteries were not being as healthy, we're not harvesting enough energy, we're not storing enough energy, we're using more than we're storing. So when you get into the middle of January, every 2 weeks, really bad sunshine, and it freezes up and everything fails. We found ourselves replacing a bunch of batteries the first year or two. So then we went back and looked at the data. We go, okay, we're going to start increasing our photovoltaic harvesting. We want more sunshine here. And then we engineered a battery banks in a way that, we can go 3 to 7 days without sunlight. So those are some of the things that we've learned along the way. Sensors, same deal. We've known that we've known that the pressure transducers that we're initially using,
they're susceptible to following and they require more labor in the field in order to keep them running. Yeah, limited performance around freezing temperatures. We've recently switched to non-submersible transducers, which we're referring to as bubblers throughout. And those require less maintenance, higher data accuracy. And that was kind of one of the big phase-ins, I think, within the last maybe 10 years or so, where it's transitioning, people that monitor water. I think that's a transition in technology that's been occurring.
So we never let the network remain. We just don't build and leave it alone. We're always looking for ways to improve. how can we make our data better? How can we make everything better? So we're always constantly operating, making it better, staying on top of it. So when Con said we're mostly implementing solar now, that's what we're doing. We don't have to build as many new sites. We've got a couple more new ones going on, and thank you so much for letting us be a part of this.
Dean.
Mr. Chairman, do you have a problem with you use the 900 band? Do you have a problem with that getting overloaded and keeping things running in the 900 band?
I've been using 900 since 1980s. I started using it, like high power stuff in New England. And some pretty nasty places like on Washington, we have sites up there too. And it's the one thing, so when you look at frequencies, 900 lets you penetrate into smaller windows, smaller openings. So your cell phones that are sitting here, most of them are running the 700 megahertz, which is a favorite band. They're running 4 bands, but you have longer range. Bands like UHF. No, I think the trick was actually, that's a good point, because in the beginning, the routing wasn't wrong. So when we set up our routing, we are telling the entire network when you're going to talk, who you're going to talk to, and what kind of information you're going to deliver from one box to that hub. So no,
And then
we got a lot of room. You could probably get upwards of maybe 300 stations on one network. Fort Hall, for example, their network's gotten pretty big. They have almost 200 sites, and so we helped them engineer that. And we just took that one antenna, made it into three repeaters up top. We're running 3 simultaneous networks on 900 megahertz side by side of one server, and that's never done before. That was good kind of hard.
Yeah, and were you thinking of multiple users on the same? Okay, so one example is there's a variety of end user options that you can adjust. So maybe if you're hitting noise in one level, you can adjust like maybe like a network key, or there's a variety of different
So we go out,
ways to tweak it from.
we'll go out and take our spectrum out. Like when we're building Burley, our big concern was, Winnemucca's right there. And they have 900 megahertz network. But their antennas are pointed in the opposite direction. But the big thing there was that we went ahead and took our spectrumalized route, and we wanted to see when they were coming up. We wanted to look at the actual spectrum. So we not only do we look at the band, but we're also looking for harmful interference and other users within that area, because Idaho Power uses 900. We have a lot of users, and there are ways to prevent interference by using different keys and different encryption codes, and we all have different codes. So we work very closely with the Fort Hall tribe to make sure that we don't walk over each other. We have 19 stations over there as well.
Any other questions? Brian?
Mr. Chairman, because the board has this new veto power you mentioned, I think we're gonna have to veto another retirement for Tito here. I haven't seen the audience smile during presentations very much, and you're a good entertainer and obviously know what you're talking about.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Tito has also scheduled his retirement, well-deserved retirement. And I can't express how much help he's given us over the last several years in this program, and we'll certainly miss him.
Okay, yes, thank you. Many thanks. It looks like you're leaving it in capable hands. I think the program will continue. You will be missed. Appreciate your enthusiasm, your knowledge, and thank you for enlightening us today about the program. Okay, thank you both. Okay, next on the agenda, we have rental pool procedures. Mary, gonna handle that for us?
Yes, she is, Mr. Chairman.
Do you want me to release?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I have,
Welcome.
thank you. I have amended rental pool procedures present to you today for 3 different rental pools. These are going to be for Water District 1 Upper Snake, Water District 65 Payette, and Water District 65K Lake Fork Creek. Today, I'll just be presenting their red line as well as my review memo that I sent to the director so that he can provide his recommendation to you tomorrow. The first is going to be the Upper Snake 01 procedures. There weren't a whole lot of substantive changes in these. Most of them were just updating numerical references or any language changes which weren't consistent with the rest of their procedures, for instance, replacing rule with procedure. There was one large change to modifying language under procedure 4.1 for proper authorization and handling of funds. And then they also updated, as you're aware, the water master has changed in March. And so they have a new water master and his name was updated at the 2 forms at the end of the procedures. I've also noted in my memo to the director that because of the number of changes that have happened over the years in Water District 1, it may be easier for them to try to restructure some of this. It gets some simplicity out of them for easier understanding for members who are not part of the district so that they can understand these procedures better. And then I also noted that they have a resolution for a contingency fund for excess fees where storage was used in excess of what was expected. And these fees are assessed later, but the procedures remain silent on these. So I would recommend that some sort of inclusion of this excess use and contingency fund be included in their procedures. Would you like to see any of the red line remarks in Water District 1?
Board, if you had a chance, I think these were sent out earlier. If you had a chance to review them, is there any questions about the technical corrections that were made in the 01 procedures? I'm good. I think we're okay, unless there's something specific you want to highlight for us.
No, sir, I'm okay. If you've already reviewed the red line and you were familiar with their changes already, Mr. Chairman. So I think we could go on to Water District 65 if that's okay with everybody.
Okay, let's continue.
I do have 60 pages of materials, so it's going to take me a little bit to get from one to the next because of the red line.
You're
That's okay.
doing just fine.
Yeah.
We can
The table of contents. Thank you. Yeah, I'm on it. Thank you. It was a slow scroll. All right. So the next part of this is going to be Water District 65 Payette. They are actually changing up a bit of their procedures because they're introducing private leases. And so because of this introduction in private lease language, this is also going to change what they commonly refer to as the rental pool as a common pool separate from their private lease pool. And so this change will update some of the procedure references as well as definitions. They've added common pool into their definitions. They are also adding an impact statement. So any impacts to flows for the use of storage, this last to fill, the way that is done, that is now described in their procedures as well. And then they also have added definitions for in-basin or out-of-basin uses. And then also changing priority date for assigning storage or the request to rent that storage from the common pool. That change is going to be from July 1st now to June 1st. I have no other comments about the changes that were made in 65.
Okay, board members, any questions on this set of procedures? Mr. Barker?
I understand that in 63, they had, sorry, 65, they were doing some proposed changes to the last to fill rules. Could you fill us in on how that worked out with the committee?
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Barker, would you like me to look at those directly in the procedure or would?
No, I just want you to summarize what the discussion was, because I think in 65, the last to fill rules in the past were simply for out of basin rentals.
Mhm.
And now they're applying it to all rentals. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, sir. Oh, so I understand your question better now. So
Okay.
we now have a second last to fill and a last to fill. So
Okay,
our,
they broke it into two tiers.
yes,
The same the way it's done in 01, is that right?
it's very similar.
Okay.
Yes. So
And then they also wanted to have basically a subcommittee of the Water District Advisory Committee to be responsible for the rental, is that right?
yes, sir. So last year they,
That's something new that we haven't seen in other rental pool procedures, right?
right. This is something that we addressed. So Neil, Garrick, Ann and I, as well as Brian, we sat down together to discuss the notion of whether or not a local rental pool committee could exist that was not the actual advisory committee. And the statutes do not align with that being, the statutes kind of prohibit that from happening within a water district that already has an advisory committee because they need to be in charge of those funds. And they need to have that vote on the procedures when they change them. And so after we had those discussions, and Neil is here also if you have any questions for him regarding that. But what we did is we struck any notion of having the subcommittee, that local rental pool committee outside of the advisory committee operate these procedures.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions on the Basin 65 rental pool procedures? Okay, I think we can move on.
Thank you. Use my handy dandy table of contents here. Just switch. So the last step for amended procedural changes is going to be for Water District 65K, the Lake Fork Creek. This is a very small rental pool and when you consider it against the other 4 rental pools. But they did want to make some changes, and a large part of that was actually increasing their rental fee to make the procedures more consistent with how they were actually doing what they were doing. And so previously it was $2.70 an acre foot, which included their 50-cent water district admin fee and the 10% board surcharge, which was much smaller than what they were actually charging. And so I worked with 65K, their secretary Shirley, to try to help draft some different options for them to get their procedures up to what they were charging. And they settled on $15.50 an acre foot plus $1.55 as the 10% surcharge plus their 50-cent or $1.50 and then the 50-cent for water district fee. And so this will let them capture that a lot better. Because of this change, they also added a new definition for rental prices. So that's described and it refers to that procedural change. And then they also struck any mention of rule that wasn't applicable to actual water supply bank rules. If they referred to their procedures as rules, they struck that, and we're going to replace it with procedure. Their actual clean copy that you'll see tomorrow doesn't have procedure either. They're just paragraph numbers. And I believe that's kind of it. The other addition was procedure 3.9. They just wanted to clarify that the rental pool is not responsible for assessing or collecting carriage fees on behalf of irrigation districts, which is an important mention. And so that's clarified now in their procedure. Do you have any questions or would like to see any of the red line version of 65K rental procedures?
Questions? I guess, Mary, this set of procedures were the ones that were kind of redlined in cursive, weren't they? Is that what I was looking at?
Yes,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, yes, this is the red line version is their printed procedures with
Yeah.
actual handwritten strike through and remarks.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that was because they didn't have a Word version existing.
No, it's fine. I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
make sure I was looking at the right file.
Yes,
But I went through it and I think it makes sense to me. Tomorrow you'll have a clean version to present us.
correct. And I
Okay.
can go to it real quick if you would like to see any clean version, but I can also present all the clean versions tomorrow.
I think we probably ought to put the clean versions on the screen tomorrow before we take action on them. So there's probably people online who don't haven't had the opportunity to review this like we have. So,
Absolutely.
okay. Any other questions for Mary? Okay, this will be on the agenda to approve these sets of procedures tomorrow.
In fact, there's a couple things with rental pools. We'll be looking at these 3 sets of procedures, and then we also have it's scheduled for the board to reappoint the advisory committees for all the rental pools, including 63, which does not have updated procedures.
Or 74.
Right, correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, moving on, administrative rules update.
Eric Bowe with the department will give the board an update on where things stand with administrative rules.
Okay, welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I do appreciate the opportunity to provide a brief update on the rulemaking efforts for the department on what is continuing to be a busy 2024 year. So currently we have 4 rulemakings that are active. The Department of Water Resource rules, IDAPA 370301 are adjudication rules. IDAPA 370302 are beneficial use examination rules. And then we also have our Idaho Water Resource Board rules. The 370309 are well construction standards rules. And then 370303 are rules and minimum standards for the construction and use of injection wells. I'll refer to that as the injection well rules going forward. So earlier this month, we submitted to DFM the notice of intents for the adjudication rules, the beneficial use examination rules, and the well construction rules. They are scheduled to be published in the April Administrative Bulletin, which will advertise that first round of public meetings to start the negotiated rulemaking process. With that, the first public meeting for the adjudication rules is scheduled for May 6th. The first public meeting for the beneficial use examination rules is scheduled for, May 16th for the adjudication rules. The beneficial use examination rules will be scheduled on May 6th, first meeting. And then finally, the first public meeting for the well construction rules will occur on April 25th. Rulemaking efforts for the injection well rules is ongoing, with the next public meeting tentatively scheduled to be May 15th. I plan on formally notifying all the interested parties early next week. Just wanted to touch base with DEQ on a couple of things prior to that. Regarding the injection well rules, we have been collaborating with DEQ on appropriate regulation for the newly proposed activities involving the injection of recycled water derived from municipal and industrial wastewater sources. This brings, as the board knows, brings with it many challenges, and we just want to make sure that we have appropriate regulation in place to protect the valuable underground source drinking water aquifers that we utilize. With that said, if the board is interested, following the next public meeting for the injection well rules, I am happy to provide an update to the board, a little more in-depth on the recycled water issue. And I can follow up with Brian on that as far as the timing, either in the May meeting or July, whatever works. And with that, that basically sums up what's going on. Happy to stand for any questions that Mr. Chairman or the board may have.
Board members, any questions for Eric? Go ahead, Al.
The
The first three, the adjudication, the beneficial use exam, and the well construction rules are going out. I believe it's April 3rd. It's next week in the administrative bulletin. And that's what initiates the process. And we can hold our first public meeting. I think the rule is 21 days after.
Okay, any other questions? Brian?
Did these, Mr. Chairman? Can't remember. Eric. Do these rules also cover our water board injection recharge wells?
Yes. So for Mr. Chairman, Mr. Olmstead, it depends on which one. The injection well rules cover shallow and deep injection wells. So for those, yes, it would be related to that. Any rapid infiltration basins or along those lines are covered by DEQ rules.
Okay, board members, anything else? Okay, good luck with rulemaking.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate it.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Patton, next on the agenda,
Bigwood,
Bigwood.
groundwater management area plan update. And Shelley Keene will give an update on where that process is at.
welcome Assistant Director Keene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Give Jennifer just a moment to get started here on PowerPoint. Great. Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, my name is Shelley Keene. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I've been asked to report to you on the Bigwood River Groundwater Management Area Management Plan process. You've heard reports on this topic in 2021, 2022, and 2023. It's time for another report because the 3-year management plan expires at the end of 2024 and deliberations are underway for updating and extending the plan. To advance. There we go. So since you've already heard a lot about this topic, I'll go through the next few slides very quickly as a refresher. Then I'll speak a bit about how the plan has worked so far. And I'll finish with a few remarks on what lies ahead. And please let me know at any point if you need me to slow down and add more detail or if you have questions. First, as shown on this slide, the Wood River Basin is in south central Idaho. It's IDWR's Administrative Basin 37. Great, thanks, Jennifer. Here's the larger scale map of Basin 37 and the groundwater management area. Groundwater management area is in the red outline. I think you've probably seen this map before, but just in case to get oriented, Magic Reservoir is right in the center. The Camas Prairie is to the left. Sun Valley and Ketchum are near the top. And the Bellevue Triangle is just to the northeast of Magic Reservoir. And the communities of Shoshone and Gooding and Richfield are near the bottom, which is to the south. Water flow is generally from north to south, ending in the Snake River near Bliss, except for Camas Creek, which flows west to east into Magic Reservoir. Areas of extensive irrigated agriculture occur on the Camas Prairie, in the Bellevue Triangle, and along the southern parts of the Little and Bigwood Rivers. And the ground, as I mentioned before, the groundwater management area is within the red line. So as you know, The key to understanding the underlying conflict is that groundwater pumping by holders of junior groundwater rights in the Wood River Valley, the Bellevue Triangle, and probably the Camas Prairie reduces the supply of water to senior surface water right holders in the Big Wood River north and south of Magic Reservoir and in Silver Creek and the Little Wood River. The connection between surface water and groundwater in the Wood River Valley, the Bellevue Triangle, and Silver Creek has been extensively studied and modeled. It's well understood. As for the Camas Prairie, you heard from Sean Vincent about it earlier this morning, and you're aware that IDWR and the USGS, with funding from the Water Resource Board, have launched a study to develop a conceptual model of groundwater occurrence and flow and a water budget for the Camas Prairie aquifer. And this will help us understand how groundwater pumping on the Camas Prairie affects Camas Creek and Magic Reservoir. Adding even more complexity to the basin is the contribution of water from the Snake River. The orange boundary on this map that you're looking at is the boundary of the Big Wood Canal Company, which gets water from Big Wood and Little Wood rivers. And it's also the boundary of American Falls Reservoir District Number 2, which brings in Snake River water through the Milner-Gooding Canal. And this slide lists important events in the history of water management in the Wood River Basin. You've heard a lot about these in the past, so I won't recite them. The main takeaway from this slide for today is that the management plan covers the years 2022 through 2024, and it expires at the end of this year. You've also heard about the structure of the management plan. Baseline mitigation measures are implemented every year, and in dry years, specific additional mitigation measures are required. And the plan allows for adaptive management or adjustments as needed to meet the plan's overall goals. And at the heart of the management plan are two mitigation measures. First is a commitment to maintain 32 CFS flowing in the Little Wood River at Station 10 near Richfield during the irrigation season. Surface water users felt this was the minimum natural flow needed for Little Wood River water right holders below Station 10 to get by. For Littlewood water users below Station 54, which is near Shoshone, and for lower Big Wood River water users, the groundwater users agreed to acquire Snake River storage water, be delivered via the Milner-Gooding Canal, which crosses the southern portion of Basin 37, and unused storage water can be remarketed September 3rd. This slide's a more comprehensive listing of the baseline mitigation measures. Includes fallowing of irrigated acres within the groundwater districts, and South Valley, limiting the irrigation season for groundwater pumpers, financial contributions to the Conservation Infrastructure and Efficiency Fund, or CEF as we call it, and funding supplies. And all of those measures are helping maintain the 32 CFS at Station 10 on the Littlewood and inflows to Magic Reservoir. And then finally, as I mentioned, Snake River storage water is also supplied for the Big Wood River water right. The advisory committee and IDWR rely on publicly available forecasts from the NRCS and the Northwest River Forecast Center to determine if dry year mitigation measures are required. The April to September forecast at Haley is above 210,000 acre feet. Only the baseline actions are required. Below 210,000 acre feet, the plan has 3 tiers, and each tier calls for the groundwater districts to achieve additional reductions in consumptive use through cuts in groundwater pumping and by supplying additional storage water to the surface. And this next slide lists some additional measures that the management plan calls for in addition to baseline and dry year. The board contributes funding to SEEF. The Camas Prairie Aquifer Study is underway, as I mentioned, with funding from Water Resource Board. In 2022, IDWR issued a moratorium on new consumptive water rights. And IDWR is in the beginning stages of developing a computerized accounting model for Water District 37. And as you heard earlier, IDWR is working to update the Wood River groundwater flow model. So those are additional measures. What do the groundwater users participating in the management plan get for implementing their baseline and dry year mitigation actions? They get safe harbor from administration of their water rights on a timely basis. In other words, they get certain. So how has the plan worked so far? There are lots of possible metrics, but as I mentioned above, a key metric is probably the 32 CFS flow target at Station 10 on the river. This slide shows that in 2022, a really dry year, it was challenging to meet the target during the first half of July. The second metric is storage delivery. In 2022, Water District 37 implemented significant priority cuts in July, and consequently 1,162 acre feet of Snake River storage water was delivered to Littlewood water users and 177 acre feet to Bigwood River water. So 2022 was a dry year. What about 2023? That was a very wet year. This slide shows that the target flow at Station 10 was easily met. And in 2023, no storage water delivery was made. Water District 37 made no priority cuts on Bigwood River below Magic Reservoir or on Silver Creek and the Littlewood River. Consequently, in September, the advisory committee met and decided, quote, committee members unanimously agreed that the surface water supply was adequate to finish the 2023 irrigation season without storage water, without the storage water. So what lies ahead? First, 2024 looks like it will be what the plan calls an adequate water supply irrigation. The additional management actions for dry years are unlikely to be triggered, but it won't be as wet as 2023. So having a dry year, a wet year, and a more average year in the 3-year plan window should be a real benefit, a real bit of good luck for us in learning how to manage with the plan in place. So meanwhile, as I mentioned, because the 3-year plan expires at the end of this year, the advisory committee started meeting again in February and plans to meet the third Wednesday of every month through September to work on updating and extending the plan. This slide lists the advisory committee members, a few of whom you probably all know, or maybe you know all of them, includes one of your own members, Pat McMahon. The committee has 11 members who represent surface water user interests and groundwater user interests throughout the Wood River Basin. The makeup of the committee is mostly the same team as it was in 2021, but there are some new cast members, including Justin Stevenson, now representing South Valley Groundwater District, and State Senator Ron Taylor and Representative Jack Nelson participating as ex officio members. And since Tim Luke retired from IDWR, Corey Skinner has joined me in facilitating committee meetings. And I think you know Corey, he's IDWR's regional manager in our Southern Region office in Twin Falls. And several other IDWR staff members from the hydrology section and the Southern Region office support committee functions. So the advisory committee has developed a list of 46 questions or suggestions they want to explore. The last meeting, we spent a lot of time organizing those questions into groups or themes, as I'll call them, on a color-coded list that some of you may have seen. And this slide is my attempt in my own language to summarize those groups of questions or themes. The themes reflect experience from the first 2 years implementing the plan. They're responsive to lessons learned. For example, acquiring Snake River storage water to meet baseline and dry year requirements is becoming very costly and difficult, and consideration may need to be given to long-term storage water acquisition. Also, the baseline actions don't account for really wet years like 2023. Perhaps reduction to the irrigation season, following of irrigated acres, and delivery of storage water, all of which are baseline requirements, aren't really needed in wet years like 2023. An item for the Water Resource Board to consider is whether it will continue its financial support of the SEIF. For the initial 3-year period, the board has been contributing funds to the SEIF on a matching basis, which is currently dollar for dollar. The SEIF has been called upon to fund some important projects, including $100,000 for reshaping and lining a portion of the Lincoln bypass for Big Wood Canal Company, $50,000 for lining 2 half-mile sections of canal, installing transducers at 4 sites, and installing 2 automated gates for Big Wood Canal Company in American Falls Reservoir District Number 2, and $30,000 for equipping 21 sites with transducers and telemetry to improve water delivery efficiency for Big Wood Canal Company, American Falls Reservoir District Number 2, and Water District 37. But at the end of 2023, the SEIF has a year-end balance of $347,000 with $80,000 of pending obligations for the last 2 projects I just mentioned. And I was told yesterday the SEIF has 1 pending proposal to line part of the bypass canal around the dry beds upstream of Magic Reservoir on the Big Wood River. And then also for the board, since cloud seeding is a component of the management plan, the board's level of ongoing financial support for cloud seeding in the Wood River Basin will be important to consider. And then finally, an item to mention is the new law, Idaho Code 42233C, that will take effect in July, defining the eastern Snake Plain Aquifer area of common groundwater supply. The law authorizes the director to include tributary basins in the area of common groundwater supply, and the region into which the area of common groundwater supply may be expanded includes Administrative Basin 37. And here on this map, I've overlaid the boundaries of the groundwater management area, the Big Wood groundwater management area, on that ridgetop to ridgetop area that the ESPA area of common groundwater supply can be extended. But the statute does have a provision that says groundwater management areas with approved management plans sufficient to manage the effects of withdrawals on their own aquifer segments, the ESPA, and other hydraulically connected sources are to be exempted from the expansion. So I think what that means for Big Wood River groundwater management area groundwater users is that working with a director to create their own robust management plan for the Big Wood River groundwater management area increases the likelihood that they will maintain separation from ESPA water administration. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation, and I'll stand for questions.
Okay, board members, questions for Shelley? Joanne?
Thank you, Chairman Raybould. Shelley, has there been consistent compliance in the followed land during the last 2 years?
Mr. Chairman, Member Cole-Hansen, that has been a little bit of a challenge. There has been, I don't have the information right in front of me. There's actually a report posted on the website, but there has been work by the Compliance Bureau to look at that. In large part, there's been compliance, but maybe not quite to the extent that was completely called for in the plan.
Follow-up question, yes. Is there any way to measure the non-compliance impact?
Mr. Chairman and Member Cole-Hansen, among the questions that are going to be contemplated by the advisory committee are some looking at the effects of the baseline measures that include shortening the irrigation season, the fallowing, and those kinds of things. And those are going to be, I think, referred to the technical working group that Sean Vincent has been coordinating for us. And I think that will be the kind of thing that that will be looked at.
Okay, other questions? Al?
Thumbnail where we are committed funding the seed. Gave us this project. We got any way to assess the benefit of the project.
I'll see if I can break my response to that one question into multiple parts. So first of all, the board's commitment, I'm going off memory here, was 2-for-1 in the first year to kind of get the SEAF up and running. And then in the second and third year, a 1-for-1 match to the contributions made by the cities and the Camas Prairie folks up to $100,000. And, the board is making that contribution. As I mentioned, the balance right now is $347,000. I don't have in front of me, Mr. Barker, the breakdown of the accounts for how much has actually been contributed exactly by each entity. But I think one question that will be looked at is by the advisory committee is, what have these projects accomplished and are there more? And I know that the SEAF is actually scheduled to meet tonight in the Wood River Basin. And they're going to come back with some thoughts and recommendations about future operations of the SEAF.
Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Go ahead.
So Shelley, our contribution is over 3 years. So this would be the third year of our matching, that we match the contributions from the cities and Camas Prairie. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, Member Barker, yes, that's right.
So seems like one of the things the committee, the advisory committee or the SEAF committee needs to look at is, are they going to ask the water board for additional or continued funding, because that funding source is gone at the end of this year under our existing resolutions. And I don't know if that's part of what the committee's been looking at, but I think that should be something that you all should look at and let us know soon if that's something that if the committee wants to ask the board to participate in going forward. And that was a question too, right?
And I'm gonna throw one more lob at you, Shelley, I guess. Does the advisory committee feel like the board's contribution to date has been adequate or enough to take care of projects as they come online? It sounds, I was surprised you had as big a balance in the account as you have. If something were to continue ongoing in the same manner as our contributions have for the last 3 years, do you think that would be adequate, or has the advisory committee even talked about that at all?
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Barker, the advisory committee hasn't advanced in its conversations to that level yet. I know that they're certainly grateful for the contributions that the Water Resource Board has made to the SEAF. And the SEAF is, active in evaluating projects and seeing what it can do. But I'm just looking here at the color-coded sheet of questions that I mentioned earlier. And among them are a number of questions related to the SEAF. And it starts with, should the SEAF be part of the new plan? If not, what about disposition of the funds? Should SEAF contributions be higher in 2025 than in 2022? So that's not all of the questions there, but it just gives you an idea that the advisory committee is planning to work through those kinds of questions that you're asking. And my notes say that the SEAF committee is preparing some recommendations for those questions, and those will be presented at the April 17th advisory committee meeting.
One more, Mr. Barker.
Yeah, this is just a question for Brian. Have we spent the money that we are obligated to spend to the seat for 2024? And what fund do we spend that out of?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Barker, I believe that money's coming out of the water management account. Whether we have advanced those funds to the SEEF committee for 2024 yet, I am not aware of that, but I can find that out by tomorrow.
Okay, Mr. Olmstead.
Mr. Chairman Shelley, so I haven't been on the SEEF committee, but I've been advisory to them, and actually Dean's kind of alternated with me on it, you know, the SEEF committee was really important to get as Shelley said, a jump start on the whole program and kind of show them how to apply for projects and rank those projects, that sort of thing. And then the SEEF money was never supposed to be used to rent any water. So that was supposed to be, you know, kind of segregated. But then it was all the same fund, the money that was put in by the cities and the water users and from the water board. So the fact that we had no water rental last year that's probably $150,000 with the price that if it would have been a drier year last year. So, but I think the SEEF committee's I think they're feeling a little bit like they're kind of a middleman. And, you know, we're needed at first, but now people know how to apply. You know, they can apply to the water board the same as they could apply to the SEEF committee essentially. And so I think I think that there haven't been as many high price projects as I think they were expecting. It's a smaller basin. It's hard to find the right places. So I think those will be the questions that SEEF will decide, but I don't think they'll be necessarily looking for more money for this, for the next go around, but I could be wrong on it.
Go, Dean, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I had one comment. I think there's plenty of projects up there to do. I think that they've had some struggles getting how to get going on them, but I think, I know whether they'll go forward, that's their choice, but there's quite a few projects, particularly on the upper end of that, the Richfield Canal and the upper end of that project that could really benefit from some of that SEEF money, but I mean, that's their choice they want to do going forward.
Okay, board members, any other questions? It would appear to me that there will probably be an ongoing role for the board to support this management plan with some sort of financial aid, whether that be through the SEEF or directly to projects in the basin. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Okay, Mr. Patton, legislative report.
Yes, Deputy Attorney General Garrick Baxter is here to give the board an update on where things are at with pieces of legislation that the board has an interest in.
Okay, welcome, Garrick. First of all, we want a prediction on when Sine Die is going to come.
I am the blast bridge to be asking about that. I have not been successful in the past on that. I bet I'm not going to be putting any money on that one.
Not today. Mr. Gibbs, who's had some experience with this, do you have a comment?
I do, just in jest, but my first year here was when we were in the annex for the last year of the remodel. And we had a pool for Sine Die. And I picked a Wednesday. And as soon as I did that, everybody said, it will never be on a Wednesday. They'll go home on a Friday regardless. So it's maybe next Friday. I don't know, but that was my experience. It was never a Wednesday.
Yeah, well, I was trying to elicit some information last night from the representative that I'm most closely attached to, and she wasn't predicting. So I guess we'll see. Okay, what have the legislature done for us or however you want to categorize the current legislation. How we doing?
We're doing all right, Mr. Chairman. I don't know about you guys, but it only seems like yesterday I was up here and we were talking about legislation that we were anticipating coming up to the 2024 legislative session. As we've already talked about, the good news is we're on the back end of that, and hopefully the session's coming to an end very soon. I'm here today to talk to you about the bills that have passed this session. Also talk to you a little bit about one that I previously talked to you about that did not pass. I wanted to give you a little update with regards to that. So let's go ahead and jump right on in. Up on the screen, you have a summary of the bills there. This is not in your materials, but is being displayed up on the screen. So feel free to follow along if you like. As always, if you have any questions as I'm going along, please don't hesitate to stop and ask. So the first bill, and thank you, Jennifer, for your assistance with this. First bill is that House Bill 402. Now, last board meeting, I discussed this piece of legislation a little bit with you guys. It is a bill that was proposed by IDWR and relates to Class 2 injection wells. I recall that those wells are wells that take the waste stream from oil and gas wells and inject them back into the ground. EPA took back control of this program and IDWR no longer regulates it. So we proposed a house cleaning bill to remove that language out of Idaho code. The good news is that this passed the House and the Senate, was signed by the governor, and does become effective now July 1st. Second bill there on our list is House Bill 425. That relates to the National Flood Insurance Program. Again, we talked about this bill a bit last meeting. This legislation modified certain definitions in Idaho code that relate to the operation, cleaning, maintenance, and repair of water delivery systems. This legislation responded to concerns that were raised by FEMA, that certain definitions in Idaho code were actually inconsistent with definitions with the National Flood Insurance Program's regulations. In fact, FEMA threatened suspension of the National Flood Insurance Program in the state of Idaho if those definitions weren't changed. So we have good news here too. House Bill 425 passed, was signed by the governor, and was effective upon his signature. So the good news is that the National Flood Insurance Program is no longer in jeopardy in Idaho because of these definitions. And I will just note that work on this piece of legislation and to get a solution in place that was supported by the water users took a very long time, number of years, and even some of the people here in this room, and I know they're watching online today, participated in that. That was a long slog for a lot of people, but I think we were able to get to a good resolution in the end. So the next piece of legislation, House Bill 467, excuse me, relates to assessments against certain groundwater users. Idaho code allows groundwater districts to assess groundwater users within their districts $100 per acre foot charge for those groundwater users who don't comply with reductions assigned to them as part of a mitigation plan. Now, what was happening was that the districts were finding that that $100 charge was no longer an effective deterrent, with some operators just choosing to instead pay the fee. This bill increased the charge to $300 per acre foot to ensure that there's a more effective deterrent there. This bill passed both the House and Senate, was signed by the governor, and becomes effective July 1st. The next piece of legislation is that House Bill 540 relates to flood control districts. Now, this bill clarifies the role of flood control districts within the state. Previously, this code section just stated that the role of flood control districts was, quote, flood prevention. Now, some felt that this wasn't an accurate description of what flood control districts actually do, and of course, attorneys get involved, so there's additional language added with regards to that. Now, the statute reads that flood control districts provide for flood risk reduction, flood response, and flood recovery. I do think it's a more accurate representation of what flood control districts actually do. So this bill also added definitions related to these new terms. This bill passed both the House and Senate and was signed by the governor and becomes effective July 1st. The next piece of legislation here, House Bill 687, relates to the Kootenai River Basin adjudication. This bill authorizes the director to petition the adjudication court to commence the Kootenai River Basin adjudication. Now, this was the last basin in Idaho for which we did not have authorization to commence an adjudication. So we now have authorizations to commence adjudications throughout the state of Idaho. And as a person who started in the adjudication, I think that's a good thing for us to be able to go through and have that consistency throughout the state. Now, the department plans to start the preliminary work to commence the adjudication rather quickly, and will blend part of the work into its existing adjudication schedules, and then we'll tack the remaining work at the end of its existing adjudication schedules. This bill passed both the House and Senate and has been presented to the governor. Now, as of about 10 o'clock this morning, the governor had not signed it yet, but if he does not sign or veto it today, because if he doesn't sign or veto it within 5 days, not including Sundays, of the day that it passed, it becomes law. So if he doesn't sign or veto it by the end of today, it will automatically become effective law. So we'll be taking a look and see what he does with that today. Next bill, thank you, Jennifer. House or Senate Bill 1339, ditch right-of-ways. Now, there was a recent Idaho Supreme Court decision that limited the ability of ditch owners to restore a ditch that had been either piped or removed without permission. And this case caused water users a lot of consternation, and the Idaho Water Users Association decided to band together and work to come in, change Idaho code and change the law related to this. Now, what started, I think, as kind of a more focused change turned into really a major overhaul of the right-of-way statutes. And I think this was actually a good thing. We've had, as people started digging into it, I would say a number of outdated provisions and inconsistent provisions. And this legislation went through and helped consolidate that and remove those both outdated and inconsistent provisions. The good news here is that the bill passed both the House and Senate, was signed by the governor, and becomes effective July 1st. The next piece of legislation there, Senate Bill 1341. This bill sets into Idaho code the boundary of what is known as the ESPA area common groundwater supply. And Shelley just talked a little bit about this piece of legislation just a moment ago. You might ask, why is this important? Well, the ESPA area common groundwater supply effectively sets the area of curtailment for the surface water delivery call. So if you're within it, you're subject to administration. Now, this statute requires that the area common groundwater supply match the model boundary as described in a previously issued ESPA modeling report. And overall, the size of the area common groundwater supply is increasing. The statute also allows the director to expand the area common groundwater supply into tributary basins, as Shelley indicated. But to do so, the director has to provide notice to those people who are potentially subject to that action and provide a hearing. And as Shelley also indicated, the director cannot include an area that has essentially an effectively operating groundwater management plan. So there are certain limitations for his ability to expand that into the future. So again, just to summarize, the statute puts into code the fixed area common groundwater supply. And in the future, the director can take actions to expand it into the tributary basins, into some of the tributary basins, depending upon whether or not they have effectively operating groundwater management plans. That bill passed both the House and Senate, was signed by the governor, and becomes effective July 1st. Any questions with regards to that one? That's the one I've received most questions about outside of this group. Seeing none, I'll keep things rolling then. Senate Bill 1370 related to public water systems for subdivisions. This is the one that did not pass that I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about. You might recall at the past meeting, I discussed how the Idaho Water Users Association had put together a domestic exemption well work group to explore legislation to narrow the scope of the domestic exemption. And that work group worked really hard and came up with a number of different ideas and possible pieces of legislation. Now, one of the actual proposals from the work group was pushed forward to a print hearing before the legislature, and it was in fact printed. This bill required that the use of public water systems, or required that, let me say it this way, required that anybody who has lots of 10 or more in a subdivision, that they put in a public water system instead of drilling individual wells. So for example, if you're a developer and you're in a subdivision and you're developing, let's say 11, 12, 13 lots, no longer could you go in and just poke in, 11, 12, 13 individual wells. You had to put in a public drinking water system. While this bill did get printed, it was ultimately held in committee, and it's my understanding that a number of different groups were concerned about the legislation. Now, it's also my understanding that the Idaho Water Users Association does plan to continue to work with these groups who oppose the legislation to see a compromise that can be reached on this issue. So again, what I do anticipate is the Idaho water users will continue to be active in this discussion. And so we could see this issue come up again next year. So kind of a to be determined into the future is what's happening there. Last two pieces of legislation relate to appropriations bills. And I don't want to steal anybody's thunder tomorrow. I know you're having a fiscal update, so I'll just briefly touch on those. The first bill was a maintenance bill. This is what the legislature is now calling a maintenance bill for IDWR. This passed both the House and Senate, was signed by the governor and effective July 1st. So the good news is the lights will stay on in the water center for another year. Happy about that. The second bill, Senate Bill 1411, was the trailer appropriation bill that also passed the Senate, House and Senate, and was signed by the governor. Now, certain provisions related to that bill related to adjudication filing fees and ARPA funds became effective immediately upon signature by the governor. Other pieces of that bill will become effective come July 1st. Again, I expect that you'll get a more in-depth update tomorrow with regards to the fiscal update on these individual bills. Mr. Chairman, that's what I have for you today. Happy to stand for any questions y'all might have.
Board members, questions for Garrick?
Let me off easy. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll work you over next time.
Sounds good.
Thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, we have worked through our agenda very efficiently. Thank you, board members. Are there any non-action items for discussion? Brian, do you have anything? Pat? Dale? Joanne?
Nope.
Dean? Al? Mark?
Nope.
Okay, all right. Well, all of us except Al can leave. Al has to stay here and make up for his lost time. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, lunch has arrived for the board members and invited guests in the room next door.
Okay.
And then after that, you have your afternoon free until tomorrow
Okay.
morning.
Is there any, do we need any kind of an update or any kind of tutoring on the meeting tomorrow morning?
Meeting tomorrow morning will start at 8:30 with an executive session. We would appreciate it if you all could be here at 8 a.m. in your Sunday best for photos.
You're bringing people out from Croatia's to take our picture.
Yeah. They will put up the height scale behind us. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll tomorrow morning we'll get individual photos, and then I'm thinking when on one of our field trips this summer, we'll snap a group photo in front of Bear Lake or Priest Lake or something like that.
Okay. Okay, Mark, did you have a question or comment?
Computers can stay here.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, all right, with that, we could look for that motion to adjourn.
Our second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed?